Older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Good evening and welcome to Older Women Likewise. We are so glad to bring to you tonight a program about mothers and daughters. I'm here with my daughter, Beth Stuckey, and Jensen Nicholson is with her mother, Tracy Kirby. And we welcome everybody to our program. We just are so excited about presenting this lesson to you. Jensen and Tracy, how are things going with you all? We haven't seen you for a while, Jensen.
We're doing pretty good. How about y'all?
Yeah, doing just fine. Yep, absolutely. I'm out in Texas visiting with Beth and her family while Beth's husband is preaching in Moldova. He comes back next week, so we're really excited about getting him back home again. But it's really a pleasure to be here this evening, and we want to talk about some good things that come from the relationships of mothers and daughters who also are Christians. And we want to talk about some challenges of the mother-daughter relationship. Statistically, that's one of the biggest challenges of relationships that we find. There aren't a lot of scriptures that deal with mothers and daughters. Beth and I were talking about where do we find mothers and daughters in the scriptures. And I was telling her the best example seems to be those who aren't daughters and mothers. Naomi and Ruth, we thought was a really good one, but we couldn't think of any others that mentioned, but nothing absolute. But there are some really great scriptures of principles that help us in our relationships with mothers and daughters. We want to look at Proverbs chapter 31 and verse 26 that is talking about the virtuous woman. She opens her, let's see, this is the one, 28 was actually the one I was looking at. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. And how wonderful as mothers when our children do or appreciate us. And you've seen that as your children are becoming teenagers. And Tracy, I'm sure you see that as well, as in what a pleasure it is for you when that happens. It's those Mother's Day cards and birthday cards, that really give us pleasure of our children when we've done a good job of raising them and have done the best we can. Proverbs 23 and 22 is another scripture I wanted us to look at. Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Excuse me. And these are some Proverbs, some directions for people, for Christians, for God's people, to don't be upset with or despise your mother when she's old. And I like to say older, not really old, but you want to, that's an admonition for younger people. And really it's for all of us because we all have a mother somewhere along the line. So we have to be careful of that as well. Ezekiel 16 and 44, again, Googling mothers and daughters. And here is one. Behold, everyone who uses Proverbs will use this Proverbs about you, like mother, like daughter. And this was in a negative way that this proverb was being used. An evil mother influences an evil daughter. But on the other hand, as Christians, we know a godly mother influences to a godly daughter. And that's one of the things we want to talk about tonight is how we can, as mothers, influence our children. I like Psalm 127, verses 3 through 4, that tells us, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. And how wonderful it is that children who are good children and who love their parents and treat their parents well. What a blessing that is, and what strength for our old age. Titus chapter 2, verses 3 through 5 was the last one that I wanted to talk about. And this is it is the theme of our program. Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. And this is our job, the thing that we are to do, our responsibility from the Lord, as we are raising our children, as mothers and as daughters. And so I wanted to ask each of us, and Tracy, we'll put you in the hot seat first of all and ask you, what was something growing up that your mother did that you wanted to emulate, to copy, to be like?
Mom always carried us to church. It was always a priority that we attend every worship service. We didn't miss unless we were sick and, just couldn't. So that was something I always found important. And it's something that we tried to always do with our children. She was just a good Christian woman, and she tried to have her priorities straight. And I saw her do that. So that was very important and impressive to me that she did.
That's really good. I know for me, for my mother, her children, her family were a priority. She worked outside of the home, sometimes from necessity, sometimes because she taught school and she loved it. But always the family was her priority. I remember asking her once when we went to visit my grandparents, so what are you and Daddy going to do? She says, nothing, which, because everything was raising the children, making sure we were doing what we should. And that was something that I tried to emulate as well. Tracy?
Yes, that's what I would say. The same thing about my mom. She always put us first.
And Jensen, how about you?
I was going to say kind of the same thing that she said. I remember her dragging me off the ball field on I think it was like a Monday or Tuesday night, because we had a gospel meeting, and me changing out of my ball uniform in the car into a dress, even though my ankles still had red dirt on it.
Yeah.
That's really a strong memory, I know, and a really good example for you. How about you, Beth?
Well,
no pressure here.
No, for me, it's a lot of, I don't guess I appreciated it growing up, but once I got my own children, I appreciated it. The real level way that you disciplined us when we needed it, that it was not about, that it was about us and making us better. Not like, you embarrassed me, I can't have that, but this is not good for you. Now you need to do this. This is what's better and right.
Oh, that's good.
It was very level-headed, it was about the children. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. I like that. So, Tracy, another question I wanted for us to say is, what is about your daughter? What about Jensen? And I don't know. I don't even know if you have other children or not. With Jensen's the one we know. So, but what about your adult daughter? Do you copy, or do you do like? What have you learned? I guess what I'm saying from her. What do you do like she does, because it's good,
Well, I have 3 adult children. Jensen's in the middle. I have a son that's older, and then a daughter that's younger. And Jensen and her brother are both married, and the youngest one is fixing to get married. One thing I would say about all 3 of my children that impresses me the most is their faith. They all have a tremendous faith in God. They show up at worship service without me ever having to say anything to them. They are involved in worship service. My son leads singing. He preaches. He teaches class. The girls do the same thing. They fill in for VBS, so they've just always showed up.
We
And
don't preach and sing, but we teach classes.
No, that's right. But they teach class, and they are a good example, I think, to others. They have always been a good example to the other young adults at church. And sometimes they're the only young adults there is my children.
Yeah.
So it's always been very special to me to see them and to see their faith. And there's times where they have to encourage mom, because mom gets down in the mouth or discouraged, and they lift me up. And there's been times where, with different work and everything, even with them younger growing up, I would say on a Wednesday night maybe, I just don't know. I just don't know if we can do it tonight. And they're like, yes, Mom, we got to go. We got to go. And they push me. So I've always admired that about them.
That's great. That's beautiful. That's really wonderful.
It's wonderful. And it's something that I tell people often, that I wish that Gerald and I could take credit for it, for our children, because I think we've been extremely blessed. But I think it's just a blessing we received from God, because we don't deserve the credit for as good as they are.
That's great. That's wonderful. Well, this one is she is so patient with her children, where I'm just like, go on, do it, just do it. And she'll talk to them. She's always talked to them and explained things to them, and showed them why God gave her and her husband, their daddy, the authority. God's the authority over them. They're the authority over the children. And that's how it's not just because I said so, but because this is my responsibility from God. And she has always been so patient to talk to them. That's something I try to copy, in talking with people, and really spending time explaining it, and not just saying, just do what you're supposed to do and hush, so. But that's one thing I love about her as well. And I think those kinds of feelings that we have toward each other are what helps that relationship with your mother and with your daughter, because we do admire things about each other. But there are other times, there are relationship damagers, the things that can really ruin a relationship between mothers and daughters. Whether we've had them ourselves, whether we've experienced them ourselves, or whether we've seen them in other people, what we want to talk about some this evening are some solutions to those things that can damage a relationship. And one of them that we wrote down, that Beth and I were talking about, was that of being overly critical. Either mother being overly critical of the daughter, or the daughter of the mother. And so we wanted to talk some about that, and some solutions, some ways, or maybe first of all, I guess some examples. Jensen and Tracy, have you seen examples of that kind of over criticism? Not necessarily amongst yourselves, I know the two of you, but I mean in other situations.
You mean maybe about how clean our house is?
I'm critical of that, but I try not to be critical of other people.
She's my little OCD child.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah. I miss her being in my house to do that.
Yeah. And it's one thing to be critical of your own home, but when somebody else is, it doesn't feel good.
The only thing that really comes to mind is that sometimes maybe, I think in the way that they deal with their spouses, that we can be overcritical, and maybe in things that we say or do. I see some characteristics sometimes in Jensen that I've done myself, and I know that it's not the best way to handle a situation. So I've tried to encourage her along the line to not always follow after Mama's steps. But I think it's just one of those things, you got to talk about it and kind of be open-minded and willing to listen and learn.
Yeah. And you've seen that some, haven't you, Beth, of women that are they're upset about their mother coming to visit because they got a clean house.
You have to clean 2 weeks before mom comes, so that, so the mom doesn't go with a white glove and, make sure everything is dusted.
Sorry about her with that.
Yeah.
It's always clean. It's mine
Yeah.
that we have to worry about.
Yeah.
But if we're being honest, I get that from her mother. So
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's
So that's all right.
generation.
Yeah, that's all right then. And you're right about being not only of housekeeping, but and the biggest one to me that hurts, I think, the most for us is if a mother is overly critical of the way we raise our children, of what we do. And there's always something that the previous generation did that the next generation does not do. Remember that, putting the baby on the back? I don't know, Tracy, what yours
Yeah, I
was.
do. Well, we don't have grandchildren yet, so we've not got there.
So you hadn't done that, but it was
No, we
always
haven't had to do that yet.
when I was raising this one, it was babies on their tummy.
Oh, yeah.
But then when yours came along,
Baby's in the back.
babies on the back.
Yes.
And I've known people to get in just big fights about it,
Uh-huh.
and arguing which way's better and all like that. But my solution always was to do what she said as long as she was there.
Yeah.
As long as you didn't get caught. You know what I didn't want you to do.
That's right.
Well, now we have some little boys that are in our life that are, that I get to treat like grandchildren, and Jensen is their cha-cha. They're just she's their godmother, really. So we spend a lot of time with them, and we have had little conversations because I like to spoil. And she, they've told me I've got to back off of that a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think that's what they're for. So
Yeah.
I'll take their advice under, consideration.
Right. But I've always found that the best thing to do if somebody criticizes something you're doing is, first of all, to ask, is that criticism legitimate? Maybe you're doing it wrong. Maybe you always have. You remember the old butter on a burn? And then the younger generation tells us, no, it's ice on a burn. Well, we have to think about that. Are we doing it wrong? And then, to see whether that criticism is legitimate. But there are times that maybe the criticism is legitimate, but is there a better way to improve that relationship instead of making a criticism? Can we make a suggestion?
Yeah.
And maybe there's different ways that we can do instead of just saying you're doing this wrong or you need to do it my way. Instead, we can say, have you thought that maybe this way might work or this might be a better way to do something? And another thing that we need to think about is the motive behind a criticism. As daughters, when our mother criticizes us, I don't think we necessarily are emotionally in that moment, but we're more in the moment when we were young and our mother criticized us. Don't you think?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I've noticed it as my children are getting older. That the same thing is that when you're around your mom, it's like you revert back to childhood a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, and that can, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't feel like one adult making a suggestion to another.
And when your mother makes suggestions to you when you're younger, that suggestion is really kind of like, I suggest that you do it, and you do it because it's your mama. But when you're grown, a suggestion is just a suggestion, and you as an adult child have the ability to say yes or no, I'll do that or I won't do that. But sometimes I think adult children forget that that's the situation, maybe.
I think sometimes, don't you think, Tracy, too, sometimes my grandmother used to say this, you've heard her say, I wouldn't say anything except I know I'm right. And
I haven't heard that, but I need to remember it.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And I think as mothers, we need to remember that sometimes maybe we're not exactly right.
Right.
There might be two ways, and maybe her way's as good as my way. And I can make a suggestion, but it should just be a suggestion, just like I might suggest to a friend.
Yes. And I think too that one thing, and I hope that my kids would say too, is that you have to be willing to admit you're wrong. Because sometimes we make a lot of mistakes, and I've had to apologize a lot when they were younger, maybe not so much now as they're adults and don't live in our house and we don't have a daily, interaction like that. But I think you have to be willing to say, I'm sorry, that you're right, that wasn't right, because that also adds to the respect both ways, I think.
Absolutely. We also, but on the other hand, we shouldn't be, Beth and I were talking about this, being supportive of everything that your daughter does without any ever criticizing or ever making another suggestion is not always good either.
No.
Because everything, there's none of us who does everything every time exactly like we ought to.
And when you're doing something that's not very smart and someone says, you're amazing, deep down, I think you kind of know they're not really telling the truth, and you stop believing them when they tell you you're amazing. So we all can kind of tell that, I think.
Yeah. You expect a constructive criticism when you're messing up. Yeah, exactly. Another thing that we thought about that can be a relationship damager is jealousy. Between that, there are issues of jealousy that can be damaging to a relationship. Sometimes when the daughter marries, especially when they've had a really close mother-daughter relationship, and then all of a sudden she'd rather be with this guy. She'd rather spend time with him. She'd rather go somewhere with him. And it's like, what about me? And there can be jealousy there as well. Have y'all ever seen that to happen?
I would say not with us. I think they were kind of like, get out. Just because they love my husband so much. They're just so happy I finally found someone to marry me. But I have definitely seen that with other people. I've seen it even with mother and father and son, and not just the woman.
Yeah.
And so we weren't ready for her to go so much as it was that we were so thrilled that she found the right one.
That's right.
And that makes a difference. But we never experienced that. Now I've seen it. I've seen some moms, some friends of mine be really hurt by the lack of attention, or even siblings, that will be so hurt when somebody else comes into the picture. But we've never really had to deal with that. So thank goodness we're all, I think, a pretty close-knit family. So we all as a group spend a lot of time together. And, but we also know when to back off and kind of give each other space too. So.
Yeah. And your spouse comes first. I think we all kind of have a mutual understanding of that.
Right. Yeah. And where we do have experienced that twinge of jealousy, we need to stop and look at it, as you say, spouse comes first. That's her responsibility to her husband, not to me. And so, we have to set that aside because we have to do what's right always. And so a lot of times, to me, the solution for jealousy issues is to look into God's word. What's right? What should you be doing? And how do you need to change your behavior so that your emotions change along with it, so that you aren't jealous of the time that she spends with somebody else. And that goes both ways. Sometimes a daughter is jealous of a wife or a mother spending time with her friends instead of with her. So, that jealousy can really enter into that relationship sometimes. And then the last thing that we wanted to talk about is boundaries. And we talked about boundaries, please, I wrote. Sometimes you just want to say to people, boundaries, please, Sometimes we forget the boundaries, and we forget that. Like when I'm coming to Beth's house, sometimes I forget that it's her house and her rules and what she's, and I'll say, oh, and I have to go, boundaries, let me, And I have to, and I try to rein myself in so she doesn't have to say, Mom, you know, so, and sometimes we just genuinely forget, because, you know, Tracy, we were a mother for 18, 20, however many years.
Mhm.
And we're used to just saying, do this, do that, do the other. And we forget.
Yes.
And sometimes people will ignore those boundaries. They know that they're there, but they're ignoring them. You think of an example of that where people just, or violate boundaries, you know?
I mean, I'm thinking that a mother whose daughter is grown and has started her own household that comes in and just tries to take it over has got to be aware that she's breaking some boundaries, but she's just decided that that's okay for her to do somehow. I mean, I just think, how could you not be aware? You don't, you know, bust up into other people's homes and just take over.
That's right. That's right.
You know, you're doing something.
When you go in and tell her this food is, you know, this is the wrong, I just told you today, she had the wrong, the brand of dill pickles, you know, and of course I was teasing, but that's, it's not crazy.
It's crazy.
But I've known people to do that in seriousness. And my grandmother used to come in and she'd say, well, this is no good. And she'd just throw my food away because I was just like, she wouldn't have said anything except she knew she was right. And so, but she was, you know, she was over the top with that.
Hide your food before she came over.
Yeah, absolutely. She would tell you what you're supposed to be doing. But yeah, we have to remember, I like and of course, naturally, I like the scripture. It says, a man leaves his father and his mother and cleaves to his wife. And in a way, the reverse is true too. When you marry, you're out of the home. It's right. Your home, your own home. And it's not the mother's responsibility to come in and try to tell you what to do.
Right.
And all those boundaries go to a lot of things, not just in your house, but with your children. I've known grandmothers that try to steal the children away from the parent, really. I mean, just, you know, loving them and saying, oh, you know, grandma loves you. Your mom won't let you do this, but I'll let you do, you know, whatever. And you're turning them against them. I don't know if you ever know anybody like that, where you just want to go, boundaries, you know. So, but we have to really be sure that as mothers with our daughters, that we honor those boundaries that there are. It's her home, it's her life, it's her family, and we have to have our own and stay away from that, as it were. Stay outside of it, maybe is the right way.
I think as a mother, as your children get older, and our youngest one is 16 now, so we're kind of on the tail end of having children at home. As a mother, it's really weird to how your relationship with your children changes from them needing everything from you, and you having to just this is what we're doing, to change from that to like, I suggest you should do this. I think this is a good idea, and like kind of back in not being so authoritative, but more suggesting, and it's a weird thing. And I think that it's probably easier for some people than other people, but I think for everybody it's a little difficult, most likely.
What do you think? Weird. What do you think, Tracy? How does that?
I agree with that. And I think that, of course, each child is different. So you have to kind of tailor how you handle with each child a little bit different. And I have to remind myself at times, because I feel like my kids and I have always talked a lot, communicated a lot. And so I tried to tone that down after they got married a little bit, that we still talk, but I try not to invade their time when they're at home with their spouses. And one thing that was always been very important to me is that I don't cross that boundaries with my in-laws, because I don't want to put them in that position too, that they grimace every time they see my name on their caller ID or something like that. You know, I think we have to watch with that too. And I've tried really hard. It hasn't always been easy. And we laugh at home sometimes, because my husband will say, well, what are they doing? Or where are they? And I said, I don't know. I mean, I didn't ask. That's their business.
That's right.
You know, and he still at times expects me to know where they all are, where they,
Right.
you know, what they're doing. But you definitely do have to do that. And I think while it's good to always, you know, to ask advice at times, you have to sometimes learn to do that. And that's something I did not do very well early on, especially as I relied on my mom so much. And I still am, my mom and I are very, very close, and we talk all the time. And I ask her opinion about a lot. And I have to work with myself sometimes to make sure that I'm not putting her suggestions ahead of my husband's. I will say that my kids have do that very well. And maybe they do it because they didn't see me do it well. I don't know. But yeah, you have to watch those boundaries because it can really, really damage a relationship. And I don't want that. I want us all to be close, and that my son-in-law, my daughter-in-law, and future son-in-law feel as welcome in my home and with us as my kids do.
Well said, Tracy. I don't think I could come up with a better ending for this program than that. Thank you. That's just wonderful. And for all our viewers, if you have suggestions, questions, comments, please add them as you watch this program, and to help us all in all the ways that we relate to one another, our mothers and our daughters, and that we can help one another in that way. Older Women likewise is on Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and we welcome you to join us for every time that we are on. The program is on, and we thank you for joining us this evening. The men answering religious error are on Tuesday evenings. Currently, they're talking about keeping my head on straight. Really good lessons for men and for women about living the Christian life. If you have questions, Wednesdays at noon, they also are answering questions from live. And so they have some they already have gotten, and some they take right there, you know, as they're going on in the program. And so be sure to watch both of those programs. And thank you again so much for being with us this evening. And Tracy and Jensen and Beth, I really appreciate all of you joining with me tonight to bring this great lesson about mothers and daughters. So good night.
Good night. Thank you.